It started like any other hearing. Quiet tension in the air, reporters stationed outside, cameras at the ready, and the world watching. But no one, not even the most seasoned royal watchers, could have predicted what would unfold inside that courtroom. Meghan Markle, once seen as the confident, composed Duchess of Sussex, completely lost control in front of stunned onlookers. Her voice cracked, her hands trembled, and for the first time in a long time, the mask slipped. What triggered it? It wasn't a dramatic accusation or a bombshell revelation from the prosecution. It was something far colder. Prince Harry, her husband, her supposed rock, refused to stand up for her. When Meghan turned to him with pleading eyes, silently begging for backup, he looked away. The moment lasted seconds, but its weight was seismic. Eyewitnesses say she seemed shattered, almost as if she had just realized she was standing alone, not just in the courtroom, but in the war she thought they were fighting together. Whispers spread like wildfire across the courtroom. Why didn't he say anything? Was this planned? Some said his silence was strategic. Others called it betrayal. But one thing was certain. Meghan's reaction wasn't rehearsed. It was raw, visceral, unfiltered, and just like that, the fairy tale illusion cracked. But this was only the beginning, because what led to this silence and what came after paints a much darker picture of a royal couple unraveling from the inside. And what happened next would shock even their most loyal supporters. For years, Prince Harry had been Meghan's fiercest defender. From his blistering press statements during their early dating days to walking away from royal duties in what many saw as a show of loyalty, he had always been her shield. But in that courtroom, the man once willing to burn royal bridges for her seemed distant, detached, almost cold. He sat upright, hands clasped, eyes fixed forward. Not on Meghan, not on the lawyers, but somewhere far away. It wasn't anger, it wasn't sadness. It was something far more unsettling, complete emotional detachment. Witnesses described him as a ghost, a statue, and utterly unrecognizable. Why now? Why choose this moment, when Meghan was at her most vulnerable, to withdraw? Some speculate it was exhaustion, others say it was intentional. Royal insiders, speaking anonymously, hinted that Harry had reached a breaking point long before that day. Behind the scenes, sources allege that tensions between the couple had been escalating for months, with disagreements over legal strategies, public image, and even parenting styles. But this courtroom scene marked a shift, not just in Harry's behavior, but in his role. No longer the outspoken protector, no longer the partner who took on the world. In that moment, Harry looked more like a man who had given up the fight. And Meghan knew it. You could see it in her face, that dawning realization that the person she expected to catch her wasn't going to move. Her outburst wasn't just about the courtroom drama, it was about betrayal. Not from the crown, not from the tabloids, but from the one person she believed would never waver. But Harry's silence may not have been as spontaneous as it seemed, because what happened in the days leading up to the hearing reveals a different kind of strategy, one that may have been building for weeks behind Meghan's back. In the days leading up to the courtroom showdown, things appeared calm on the surface. But behind the scenes, something far more calculated was in motion. Sources close to the couple revealed that Prince Harry had been in quiet talks with his royal legal advisors, separate from Meghan's team. No press, no leaks, no warning. At first glance, it looked like due diligence, but insiders claim this was Harry laying the groundwork to protect himself, legally, reputationally, and emotionally. And Meghan, she wasn't in the loop. One aide described her as confused and deeply hurt upon learning that Harry had sought separate counsel. She reportedly confronted him, asking why, after all they'd been through together, he was choosing to go solo now. His answer? Silence. The same silence that would later echo through the courtroom when she needed him most. Some insiders suggest this shift began when Harry started reconnecting, quietly and discreetly, with select members of the royal family, notably his cousins Beatrice and Eugenie, who have often acted as bridges between factions of the royal institution. According to reports, these meetings weren't emotional reunions. They were strategic, a way to open doors that had been closed since Megxit. Even more telling, Harry was spotted, just days before the hearing, meeting with a former palace press advisor. That encounter raised eyebrows. Was he seeking PR damage control? Or was he positioning himself for a possible return to the royal fold alone? Whatever his endgame, one thing is clear. The Harry that walked into that courtroom was not the same man who once fought the monarchy to protect Meghan. And as that realization set in, Meghan's breakdown began to make even more sense. Because what she experienced wasn't just public humiliation, it was private abandonment. But if you think that was the worst of it, you haven't heard what Meghan was accused of next. And why Harry's silence may have actually protected himself, not her. When Meghan Markle stepped into that courtroom, she expected to face scrutiny, but not the kind of accusation that would leave the room in stunned silence. Midway through the proceedings, a witness introduced a claim that blindsided everyone, even Meghan's own legal team. The accusation that Meghan had knowingly misrepresented key facts during past interviews and legal filings, particularly in cases involving her privacy and media rights. The evidence wasn't just hearsay, it was a leaked email thread, allegedly showing Meghan approving statements that contradicted her official court testimony from earlier cases in the UK. The courtroom buzzed, legal teams scrambled, and Meghan, she froze. For a moment, even the sharpest spin couldn't save her from the optics. The Duchess of Sussex caught in what looked like a serious inconsistency. But while Meghan's team moved to challenge the legitimacy of the documents, Prince Harry remained eerily silent. He could have objected. He could have defended her character. He could have even cast doubt on the emails. But he did nothing. And that silence spoke louder than any statement. To observers, it was a calculated move. If Harry had defended her and the documents were later proven authentic, it would have damaged his credibility beyond repair. But by staying quiet, he preserved his own standing, especially with the royal institution he once abandoned. As one palace source put it, Harry didn't throw her under the bus, he just stepped aside and let the bus pass. That moment was the turning point. Meghan, visibly shaken, whispered something to her attorney, then looked directly at Harry. No cameras captured what was said, but according to lip readers and body language experts analyzing the footage frame by frame, her expression morphed from panic to fury. She knew then, this wasn't just about legal survival, it was personal. And Harry had made his choice. But why now? What had happened behind the scenes that caused Harry to step back so decisively? The answer may lie in a secret meeting Meghan never saw coming. Just days before the courtroom spectacle, while Meghan was finalizing statements with her legal team, Prince Harry reportedly attended a private meeting that not even Meghan knew about. It wasn't in a public setting, and it wasn't with lawyers. According to royal insiders, it took place at a discreet estate just outside Windsor, and the guest list was chillingly familiar. Among those present were two senior royal advisors, a longtime palace legal strategist, and, most shocking of all, Prince William. That's right. After years of bitter estrangement, it appears Harry and his brother met face to face, behind closed doors, away from cameras, press, and Meghan. No public handshakes, no warm smiles, just a high-stakes conversation that reportedly centered around damage control, legacy, and Harry's future. While no transcripts exist from that meeting, leaks suggest that Harry was offered something powerful, the chance to quietly re-establish his position within the royal institution under one condition. He'd have to create distance from the controversies surrounding Meghan. That didn't mean divorce. It didn't mean abandoning his family, but it meant one clear thing. If Meghan went down, he couldn't go with her. To many, this sounded like a cold-hearted deal, but from the royal family's perspective, it was strategic. Harry still held symbolic value. His re-entry could soften public criticism of the monarchy, but not if he remained tied to scandal. Insiders say Harry left the meeting torn but resolute. The very next day, he made subtle but significant moves. He requested separate briefings from his legal team, refused to rehearse joint statements with Meghan, and insisted on arriving to the courtroom in a separate car. To the public, these were logistical details. To those paying attention, they were signs that Harry had chosen the crown over the chaos, that his silence in the courtroom wasn't shock, it was choreography. And Meghan, she didn't learn about the meeting until after the hearing. The moment she did, one insider says, she lost it. But the fallout from that revelation wasn't just emotional, it was about to go nuclear. because Meghan wasn't going to stay silent anymore. And what she did next sent shockwaves through the palace halls. Meghan had spent years weathering media storms, palace leaks, and public scrutiny. But this was different. This time, the betrayal came from within, and she wasn't about to stay quiet. Just 48 hours after the courtroom collapse and the revelation of Harry's secret meeting with William, Meghan launched a full-scale counteroffensive. It didn't start with a press release or a legal motion. Number it began where Meghan always knew she could shift public perception on camera. A surprise interview was scheduled, quietly but with enough power to make headlines globally. Not with a tabloid outlet, but with a carefully selected journalist known for sympathy toward Meghan's narrative. The interview wasn't even officially announced. It just dropped, strategically timed and emotionally charged. In it, Meghan didn't name names. She didn't accuse, but her message was unmistakable. She had been left alone to face a storm she didn't create. With subtle wording and loaded glances, she painted a picture of abandonment, betrayal, and calculated distance from the very man who once claimed he would do anything to protect her. She spoke of being silenced in moments where it mattered most, of realizing some truths far too late, and of no longer being afraid of standing alone. The internet exploded. Supporters rallied, detractors doubled down. But one thing was clear: Meghan wasn't folding. She was firing back. Simultaneously, her legal team began filing motions to dismiss certain exhibits from the court record, citing alleged unauthorized access to private communications. Rumors also swirled that Meghan was preparing a tell-all memoir addendum, a bonus chapter detailing not just royal life, but her personal unraveling with Harry. And behind the palace walls, panic. Meghan's refusal to go quietly meant the crown had a new crisis brewing, one they couldn't contain with tradition or silence. But the most unexpected twist, even as Meghan sharpened her narrative, Harry still said nothing. No rebuttal, no clarification, no defense. His silence was no longer just a strategy, it had become a wall. And Meghan, standing on the other side of it, was getting ready to expose everything she had once protected. But before she could release the next bombshell, something else happened. Something that would threaten to overshadow everything. Just as Meghan was preparing her next move, and the public was still dissecting her emotionally charged interview, the story took a sharp and unexpected turn. This time, it didn't come from Meghan, or Harry, or even the palace's press office. It came from a leak, a royal insider. A confidential document marked Internal Correspondence, Privy Council was anonymously delivered to 3 major news outlets. Within hours, it was circulating globally. The leak detailed a series of internal discussions among senior royals, security officials, and government liaisons. Discussions centered around a potential royal emergency protocol, and Meghan's name was all over it. The document didn't accuse Meghan of a crime, but it revealed something far more damaging. The monarchy had officially classified her as a reputational threat. The phrasing was clinical but brutal. It referred to her media volatility, independent agenda, and unpredictable influence on constitutional perception. In other words, Meghan had become more than just an outsider. She was now viewed as a risk to the crown itself. The leak stunned the public. It confirmed what many suspected but couldn't prove, that behind palace gates, a quiet war had been waged against Meghan Markle for years, systematic, strategic, and deeply institutional. But what truly shocked the world was the timing. This wasn't a relic from the Megxit era. The date on the document was just 10 days prior to the courtroom hearing, meaning the palace was preparing for fallout before Meghan had even stepped inside the courtroom. Was this a preemptive strike, a message, a setup? And perhaps more importantly, who leaked it? Some pointed fingers at Meghan herself, claiming it was a sympathy play. Others suspected a rogue staffer loyal to Princess Diana's legacy, someone seeking to protect Meghan from the fate that once haunted Harry's mother. But there was a third theory, one that gained traction fast, that Prince Harry himself was the source. A final silent act of rebellion. Not to save Meghan, but to remind the monarchy that he still held leverage, that if pushed too far, he could take the whole machine down with one move. But if that were true, if Harry really did orchestrate the leak, then why hadn't he warned Meghan? Why let her break down in court? Why stand silent during her lowest moment? Unless The silence was the point, and the game being played was far bigger than either of them. Because what came next didn't just change the courtroom narrative, it shifted the future of the monarchy itself. The leak had done what years of press interviews, Netflix documentaries, and bombshell memoirs couldn't. It confirmed the royal family's worst-kept secret, that Meghan Markle wasn't just disliked behind closed doors, she was seen as a direct threat. And suddenly, every denial, every vague palace statement, every no comment over the past 5 years collapsed under the weight of this document. International media exploded. Hashtags like Dark Palace Panic and Royal Blacklist trended across platforms. The firm, usually tight-lipped and disciplined, found itself scrambling. But while the monarchy worked overtime to control the narrative, Meghan went quiet. No new interviews, no statements, just silence, which only fueled more speculation. Then came the real shocker. Multiple royal charities, once proudly associated with Meghan and Harry, began quietly removing her name from promotional material. One by one, the connection she had spent years building, patronages, partnerships, speaking events, started to vanish. It was as if an invisible hand was erasing her from royal history. And Harry? Still silent. Except now, that silence wasn't just emotional. It was strategic. Royal analysts began noticing a disturbing pattern. Harry had aligned himself publicly with causes and appearances that subtly distanced him from Meghan. A solo environmental summit in Geneva, a cybersecurity initiative co-hosted by a former palace advisor, private dinners with royal cousins, but no mention of Meghan. To some, it was betrayal. To others, it was survival. But behind the scenes, the mood was far darker. Whispers emerged that Meghan was being legally advised to prepare for a full character defense, not just for court, but in the court of public opinion. Her team was reportedly combing through years of correspondences, documentaries, interviews, anything that could prove her efforts to serve the crown and discredit the narrative that she had been a liability. At the same time, anonymous sources inside Buckingham Palace hinted that the royals were preparing for the unthinkable. A formal distancing statement, an unprecedented move where the monarchy would publicly acknowledge a split from Meghan permanently. If that happened, it wouldn't just be personal. It would be institutional, a modern version of royal exile. And at the heart of it all, a woman who once stood on the steps of Windsor Castle as a royal bride, now facing erasure, betrayal, and the kind of silence that can destroy a reputation louder than words ever could.